It was the 16th of December, 1944, and the Ardennes was colder than a witch's tit. Snow was coming down like it had a personal grudge against us, turning the pine trees into ghost sentinels and the foxholes into icy graves. We'd been holding this god-forsaken stretch of line for weeks, what was left of the 106th Infantry Division, after the Krauts hit us like a freight train. The Bulge, they called it later. Hell, back then it just felt like the end of the world squeezing in on us. Fog so thick you couldn't see your own boots, and the air stank of wet wool and cordite from the last skirmish. My squad, 8 men, down from 12 after that mess at Losheim Gap, was hunkered in a shallow trench near the Our River, waiting for the next shoe to drop. I was Sergeant Harlan Preacher Whitaker, 38 years old and feeling every one of them in my frostbitten toes. I'd come up from the beaches of Normandy, through the bocage hedgerows that chewed me like tobacco, and now here, in this frozen fairy tale forest preacher. They called me, not for any holy fire, but because I'd quote scripture when I was chewing out some fool who couldn't tell a grand from a broomstick. The wages of sin is death, I'd say, and mean every damn word. We were short a man after Tommy Riley caught a splinter from an 88 shell. Nothing left of him but a boot and a memory. Brass sent us a replacement that afternoon, staggering up the trail like a lost lamb, his M1 slung over one shoulder, and his pack dragging in the slush. Private First Class Eddie Russo, 19 years old, straight out of basic and greener than the Jersey swamps. The lieutenant, some kid from Yale named Hargrove, all spit and polish but no fire in his belly, marched him over to me like he was handing off a parcel. Sergeant Whitaker, this is your new rifleman fresh from stateside, but eager right. Eddie stood there, collar up against the wind, eyes wide as saucers under that ridiculous overseas Cap City boy through and through. Detroiter, he said later, born and raised in the shadow of the Ford plants. Never seen a cow, he joked once, but that was weeks from now. Right then, he just looked like he'd puke if the wind shifted wrong. I sized him up quick, skinny as a rail, hands soft from turning wrenches instead of triggers, and a face that hadn't shaved more than twice a week. Russo, I barked, you got smokes, ammo? Or did they forget to pack the balls back at camp? The squad chuckled. Old hands like Corporal Zeke. Tex Malone, who'd lost half his ear to a jerry grenade in Sicily, and Private Lou Doc Ramirez, our sawbones, who could stitch a gut wound with one hand and light a lucky strike with the other. Eddie fumbled in his pack, dropping a clip of .30-06 rounds into the snow. Clink, clink. Like Christmas bells from hell. Tex snorted. Christ, Sarge, we got us a live one. Bet he thinks the war's a ball game. I stow it, Tex, I growled, but I wasn't smiling. I'd seen too many like him, kids with stars in their eyes, dreaming of glory like it was something out of the pictures. Last one, a farm boy from Iowa, froze solid during a patrol and got his head taken off by a burp gun. No room for dreamers here. Not when every shadow could be a panther prowling or an SS sniper with a scope that whispered death. Eddie scooped up the clips, cheeks redder than the mud on his boots, and mumbled, Sorry, Sarge, won't happen again. His voice had that flat Midwest twang, like he was reading from a script. I jabbed a finger at his chest. It better not, son. Out here, one slip means your gut's on a pine needle. And mine too, 'cause I'm the dumb bastard stuck babysitting you. He nodded like a puppet, eyes darting to the tree line where the fog swallowed everything. Good. Fear was the best teacher, kept you alive longer than any manual. We hunkered down as dusk fell, the kind of gray twilight that made you question if the sun even remembered Belgium. I posted watches double-timed because the Krauts had been probing our flanks all week. Rumors flew like the snow. Jerry's mounting a push. Something big, with Rommel's ghost pulling strings from the grave. Hell, we'd heard it before. Every quiet spell was just the calm before the storm. Eddie drew first watch with Tex, up on the lip of the trench, peering through the mist with his Garand at the ready. I figured it'd toughen him quick, but an hour in, the kid was shaking like a leaf in a hurricane. Tex radioed down on the field phone. Our line was a jury-rigged mess of copper wire snaking through the roots. Sarge, your boy's got the jitters bad. Keeps asking if that's artillery or thunder. I climbed up, boots sucking in the muck, and found Eddie crouched low, rifle barrel pointed at nothing. What the hell, Russo? You see bogeymen or just your reflection? He jumped half out of his skin, nearly clipping my helmet. Sarge, I heard engines. Low, like trucks, but deeper. Engines. In the Ardennes? Could be our boys hauling supplies over the rutted roads, or it could be panzers grinding gears. But the kid's voice cracked like he was describing the devil himself. Tex rolled his eyes. Kid's hearing ghosts, Sarge. Probably just the wind in the pines. I grabbed Eddie's collar, pulled him close enough to smell the Hershey bars on his breath. Listen here. Preacher's gospel. You hear engines, you report position, bearing, sound. Not deep like trucks. And you don't jump like a jackrabbit when your sergeant sneaks up. That gets friends killed. He swallowed hard, nodding again, but his eyes, God, those eyes, were 1,000-yard stares waiting to happen. Blank, like he'd checked out and left his body behind. That night, we got our baptism. Around 0200, the world lit up. Not thunder. Real thunder, the kind that rattled your fillings. 1-5s from our artillery, walking fire across the valley, but Jerry answered back with Nebelwerfers, those screaming memes that wailed like banshees before they cratered the earth. The trench shook, clods of frozen dirt raining down like Judgment Day. Incoming, I yelled, but it was redundant. Every man knew the drill. We piled into the comm trench, helmets low, waiting for the barrage to lift. Eddie was last in, tripping over his entrenching tool and sprawling face first into the duckboards. His pack burst open, spilling K-rations and that precious pack of smokes into the slurry. Lou cursed in Spanish, fishing them out while shells whistled overhead. Mierda, kid, you trying to feed the mud? Eddie scrambled up, mud-caked and wild-eyed, fumbling for his gas mask like it was a lifeline. Useless. The gas was long past, but panic doesn't read memos. When the whistle stopped, I grabbed him by the scruff. On your feet, Russo. We're moving. Patrol to check the wire. It wasn't a full probe, just a quick sweep to see if the barrage had opened a gap in our barbed coils. Standard crap, but in the dark, with snow blurring the lines, one wrong step meant a mine or a tripwire. The squad moved out single file. Me point, Tex rear, Eddie sandwiched in the middle like the jelly in a bad sandwich. We slithered through the underbrush. Garands probing the whiteout. Bayonets fixed because you never knew when it'd go hand to hand. The air was thick. Every snap of a twig a potential fritz. Eddie breathed heavy behind Ramirez, his boots crunching louder than a tank track. Quiet, damn it, I hissed over my shoulder. But then it happened. Kid stepped on a root, twisted, and his rifle clattered against a rock. Ping, like a dinner bell in hell. The woods answered. A burst of MP40 fire stitched the snow 10 yards left, green tracers lancing through the fog like angry fireflies. Down, I roared, diving into a drift. The squad hit the deck, returning fire blind, crack crack from the M1s, the familiar ping of empty clips. Jerry was close, a half squad maybe, probing like we were. Bullets whined off trees, splintering bark that stung like hornets. Lou grunted, clutching his thigh where a round had grazed him. Just a scratch, Sarge. But Eddie froze. Flat on his belly, rifle clutched like a teddy bear. Eyes squeezed shut as if that'd make the world go away. A Kraut silhouette popped up, maybe 20 yards, spraying from the hip. I snapped off a shot and missed, damn wind. And Tex nailed him with a chest hit. The Jerry flopped like a ragdoll, but not before his burst chewed the snow inches from Eddie's helmet. Up, Russo! Shoot the bastard! I bellowed, crawling over. But the kid was gone, curled fetal, whispering something that sounded like a prayer. Or a curse. The firefight sputtered out quick. Our grenades did the trick, potato mashers sailing back their way. But Lou was leaking red, and we'd burned half our clips on shadows. Back in the trench, I dressed Lou's wound with sulfa powder and bandages from the medkit, the acrid smell mixing with the cordite on our clothes. Eddie sat apart, staring at his hands, which shook like he was palsied. I couldn't, Sarge. Froze up. Thought I was back home hearing the line at the plant whistle. Tex spat tobacco juice into the slush. Plant whistle? Kid, that's a burp gun. Next time, it whistles right through your skull. I let them rib him a bit. Tough love, or what passed for it out here. But inside, it burned. This wasn't anger, it was cold math. Eddie Russo was a liability, a crack in the armor that could get us all scrapped. I'd lost good men to worse than a greenhorn. Hell, I'd lost brothers to the weather alone, but this? A city slicker who hot-wired Fords, but couldn't hot-foot it under fire? No. We were hanging by a thread in the Bulge, with Patton's Third Army miles off and rumors of Jerry's big push turning into shouts on the radio net. Eisenhower was shuffling pins on a map in Versailles, but here, we were the pins. One weak link, and the whole chain snapped. By dawn, the snow had eased, leaving a white shroud over the carnage. Jerry bodies stiffening in the drifts, our wire tangled like old Christmas lights. Lou was stable, doped on morphine, but we'd need a corpsman soon. I pulled Eddie aside while the squad brewed coffee from melted snow over a foxhole stove. "Look, son," I said, voice low so the others wouldn't hear the softness creeping in. Softness killed faster than bullets. "You're a good kid, I see it. But good don't cut it here. You freeze again, and it's not just you, it's Tex, it's Doc. It's me pulling your limp ass out of the fire." He met my eyes for the first time, real ones, not the vacant stare. "I know, Sarge. I fix things. Back home, engines, transmissions, anything with gears. But this ain't metal, it's..." He trailed off, kicking at a frozen clod. Fix things, yeah, every rookie had a story, but mine was set. The map showed an abandoned Jerry outpost half a click east, some pillbox they'd pulled back from after our barrage last week. Seemed quiet, but reports said armor was massing. Panthers, those sleek bastards with the long 75mm that could punch through a Sherman like tinfoil. Brass wanted eyes on it. Confirm if it was clear for a supply run. Suicide for a full patrol in this weather, but one man, scout and report. Perfect for washing out the week. "All right, Russo, you want to prove you're more than deadweight? Take a solo recon. Slip in quiet, check for movement, sketch the lay. Radio back on the walkie-talkie. In and out, no heroics." His face went the color of chow line oatmeal. "Alone, Sarge? In that?" I clapped his shoulder, hard enough to jolt. "Alone's how you learn, preacher's way. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow. You know the rest. Move out at 0800. Gear light, sidearm, Beano's, notepad. And Russo? Don't make me regret this." He nodded, swallowing whatever bile rose in his throat, and shuffled off to pack. The squad watched him go, murmurs low. Tex shook his head. "You're throwing the pup to the wolves, Sarge." I lit a smoke, inhaling deep against the chill. "Wolves call the herd, Tex. Better him than all of us." As he vanished into the mist, pack light and steps tentative, I felt the weight settle. The Ardennes doesn't forgive burdens. It buries them. And if Eddie Russo came back, it'd be a miracle. If not, well, miracles were in short supply that winter. Eddie Russo melted into the fog like he'd been born to it, or maybe just swallowed whole. I watched his shadow shrink down the trail until the pines claimed him, then turned back to the squad. The air hung heavy with that post-dawn hush, the kind that tricks you into thinking the world's paused for breath. But in the Ardennes, pauses were lies. Pretty ones, wrapped in snow, hiding teeth. We broke camp quick, folding the pup tents and kicking out the foxhole embers before they could draw eyes. Lou was up, leg bandaged tight, hobbling on a crutch we'd whittled from a sapling branch. "Feels like a goddamn splinter, Sarge," he lied through gritted teeth, but his color was off, pale under the stubble. Tex slung Lou's pack over his own shoulders without a word. That's how we worked, no tallies, just survival math. The lieutenant, Hargrove, had orders from battalion. Push a listening post up to Hill 400, that knuckle of rock overlooking the river valley. Jerry had gone quiet after the night's fireworks, but quiet meant planning, not peace. "Eyes on the approaches, Sergeant," Hargrove said, his voice all clipped edges, like he was back in officer school. "Report any armor sightings. Patton's boys are swinging north to pinch 'em, but we hold the hinge." Patton. Yeah, old blood and guts was churning his tanks through the slush, 90 miles south. But up here, We were the hinge, rusted creaking, one good kick from folding. I nodded, keeping my face blank. Hargrove was green as Eddie, but with bars that made him think he owned the map. Roger that, sir. We'll ghost it in, set the wire. He saluted crisp and vanished back to his CP, probably to warm his hands on a mug of something hot. Us? We humped it single file, grands slung low, bayonets glinting dull in the flat light. The trail wound up through laurel thickets, roots like snares under the snow, and every step echoed too loud in my skull. My mind kept drifting to the kid, Eddie, with his soft hands and that mechanic's squint. What if he tripped a wire, or froze again, staring down a Mauser? Part of me hoped he'd bail, hole up in some root cellar, till the fight passed. The rest? Buried it deep. No room for what-ifs when the squad's down to bones. We crested the hill by noon, the world opening up like a bad hand at poker. Valley below choked with mist, the hour a silver snake winding through white drifts. Hill 400 wasn't much, a bald crown of granite outcrops, pocked with shell scars from last month's push. Jerry had held it once, then skedaddled when our Shermans barked. Now it was ours, or so the map said. We dug in quick, scraping frozen earth with e-tools that rang like bells. I posted Tex and Ramirez on Overwatch, their Barr and Thompson chattering low as they swept the tree line. Eyes sharp, boys. If it's panzers, they'll come rumbling like judgment. The wind picked up, moaning through the rocks, carrying faint echoes, distant booms that could be our 155s or their 88s playing tag. We strung the field phone line down the reverse slope, twisting copper into the bark, praying it held against the weather. Lou took the Radio Shack, a hasty lean-to of ponchos and pine boughs, keying bursts to battalion. Post secure, no contact. Static answered, then a crackle. Copy, Whiskey 2. Stand by for resupply. Out. The afternoon dragged like a court-martial. We rotated watches, brewing tea from snowmelt and chewing sea rats. Ham and eggs in a can that tasted like regret. Tex spun yarns to keep the edge off. Tales from Anzio, where he'd dodged Monty's tea breaks and Jerry's counterpunches. Britishies stopped for crumpets once, Sarge. Right in the open. Krauts nearly bagged the lot. I half listened, cleaning my Garand with a rag that smelled of gun oil and ghosts. The bolt slid smooth, on-block clip snapping home with that satisfying ping. Reliable as sin, the M1. Better than the Krauts Car 98, with its bolt-action stutter. But reliable didn't mean invincible. My thoughts snagged on Eddie again. The walkie-talkie in my pack sat silent, its leather case stiff with frost. No squawk, no whisper. Kid was either ghosting perfect or fertilizing the pines. Either way, the hole in the squad ached like a phantom limb. Dusk fell early, the sun a blood smear on the horizon before it quit. That's when the trap sprung. No warning, no rumble, no flash. Just shadows detaching from the tree-lined downslope, gray uniforms blending with the gloom. SS by the cut of their camo smocks and the MP-44s slung easy. A full platoon, flanking wide, with an MG-42 nest covering their creep. The chattersaw ripped first, a sewing machine from hell stitching the snow at our feet. Contact! Down the slope! I bellowed. Rolling behind a boulder as rounds whined off granite like angry wasps. The squad was pros, instincts kicking in, rifles barking back in that rolling thunder of the Grand. Tex's bar hammered steady, tracers arcing into the murk, but Jerry was dug in good, their fire pinning us flat. Bullets snapped overhead, one grazing my pack strap, another pinging Lou's helmet like a dropped spoon. We traded lead for what felt like hours, but was minutes. Our fire walking the line, theirs chewing the hill like termites. Ramirez got hit first, around through the meat of his shoulder, spinning him into the snow. Doc's down, someone yelled, me probably, and Tex crawled over, dragging him behind cover while I keyed the radio. Whiskey 2 to base, under attack, SS probe, heavy MG, request fire support. Static, then a voice faint as a prayer. Negative, Whiskey 2, Artie tied up south. Hold. Hold, Christ. Hargrove's voice cut in on the command net. Sergeant, fall back to secondary line. Secondary line, half a mile down, exposed trail. In the dark, suicide. But the MG-42 shifted, its barrel glowing cherry red in bursts, walking fire up our flank. A grenade sailed in, stick job, potato masher, bouncing off rock and cratering 5 yards left. Shrapnel whined, peppering the air, and Lou screamed as it caught him low, shredding his good leg. Blood black in the snow, steaming faint. Sarge, hurts like fire. He trailed off, eyes glazing. I fired blind, the Garand bucking hot in my grip, but Jerry closed the noose. They had us cold, pinned on 3 sides, the hill's bald crown a killing box. Tex yelled over the din, "We break now or die here." His face was a mask of soot and fury, bar empty, slapping in a fresh drum. Ramirez groaned, clutching his arm, sulfa powder blooming white on the wound. 3 men left, counting me, against God knew how many. The air stank of cordite and copper, blood, and every breath tasted like defeat. That's when the devil got curious. A pop from the rear, downslope in Jerry's lines, muffled like a backfire. Then another. Their MG-42 stuttered, coughed, went silent mid-burst. Shouts in German, sharp and pissed. Was zum Teufel? Something was wrong back there. A flare popped from their side. Magnesium hiss lighting the valley in stark white, shadows leaping long. I risked a peek. Nothing at first, just the usual tangle of pines and drifts. But then, movement. Not ours. A silhouette darting low, ghost quick, between the Kraut's hasty positions. Jerry fired at shadows, MP-44s, chattering wild. But the figure was smoke, gone, then there, lobbing something small, dark. A grenade? No, too quiet. It hit an ammo crate, sparked, and bloomed into chaos. Secondary explosions. Ammo cooking off in pops and bangs, lighting their flank like the 4th of July. The SS broke form, half-turning to chase the Phantom, their fire slackening on us. "What the hell's that?" Tex rasped, propping up to snap shots at the confused ranks. I didn't answer. Couldn't. My gut twisted, a cold hook. No resupply bird, no patrol from battalion. This was inside their wire, deep in the kill zone. Flare after flare popped, but the ghost danced through them, a shadow with purpose. Another pop, Jerry radio maybe, its operator yelping as sparks flew. Their lieutenant barked orders, voice cracking with that Prussian snap. But his men milled, fear bleeding into the shouts. "Schnell! Dort!" One Kraut went down, clutching his knee, not shot? Tripped? No. Wire. Barbed coils, strung hasty across their trail. The ghost was hurting them, turning their trap into a circus. We didn't question the gift. "On my mark, bound and leap," I growled, and we moved. Low crawls turning to dashes between covers. Tex laid suppressing fire, his bar reborn with fresh rounds. While I hauled Ramirez fireman style, his weight dead on my back. Lou, we couldn't." His eyes met mine as I passed, knowing, peaceful in the pain. "Go, preacher. Tell my ma, church every Sunday." A round found him then, merciful quick, and the world narrowed to red. Jerry's fire picked up again, but fractured, half aimed at the rear, where the explosions chained. A fuel drum going up in orange whoosh, silhouettes scattering like roaches. Their MG crew abandoned post, lugging the gun upslope blind, right into Tex's sights. He dropped 2 with deliberate shots, the third fleeing into the dark. We tumbled off the hill's lip, into the laurel hell, the squad, or what was left, panting steam in the cold. Ramirez slumped against a trunk, binding his wound with shaking hands. Tex covered rear, rifle probing the gloom. "Sarge, that thing back there ain't ours." I shook my head, chest heaving, the walkie-talkie burning a hole in my pocket. Still silent. The valley echoed with Jerry's confusion, curses fading as they pulled back, the probe busted. We'd held, barely, but at what cost? Lou's ghost already whispering in the wind, Ramirez fading gray. And that Phantom? It saved our skins, but ghosts don't last. Not in the Bulge. Night deepened, stars pricking through clouds like shrapnel holes. We holed up in a ravine, radio dead. Line cut probably in the melee. Battalion would think us ghosts too, overrun and cold. My mind raced circuits, Patton pinching south. Bradley's quiet generals shuffling men like checkers. But here, we were adrift, a splinter in Jerry's paw. And the walkie, damn it! I keyed it again, thumb numb. Russo, this is Preacher. Sound off, kid. Over. Static. Then, faint as a dream. A click. Engine rumble? No. Gears grinding, distant, like a shop floor back home. My blood ran colder than the snow. What the hell was out there? The ghost wasn't done. Dawn crept gray, and with it the real hammer, armor. Low growl building in the valley, treads chewing earth. Panthers, those sleek killers, 45 tons of hate with 75s that spat death at 2,000 yards. 3 of them, hull down behind a rise, turrets swiveling slow. Our lines, if you could call them that, were paper to those. No bazooka, no half-track support, just rifles and prayers. Tex whistled low. End of the line, Sarge. Ramirez nodded faint, morphine glazing his eyes. I gripped my Gran, the wood worn smooth from too many grips like this. The lead Panther's engine revved, a diesel snarl, and its turret bore on our ravine like judgment. Then, the impossible. From Jerry's rear, that rumble answered. Not ours. Deeper, angrier, a Panther's own voice, but wrong, off-key. Crashing through underbrush, branches snapping like matchsticks. The valley lit with flares again, but this time, the shadows birthed a monster. Turret traversing wild, main gun barking blind into the pines. The lead Panther slewed, 75mm roaring in reply, but too late. The ghost machine sideswiped it, fender bender from hell, tracks shearing in sparks. Crew bailed, black uniforms spilling like oil, as the rogue tank, our ghost, ground over, crushing screams under steel. The other 2 reversed, engines howling, but the Phantom pursued, erratic, spitting coax fire that chewed their flanks. It was madness, a steel poltergeist, dodging shells that cratered the snow, its own gun silent but hull ramming like a bull. Jerry's infantry scattered, firing useless at the beast. One Panther scored a hit, ricochet, screaming off armor, but the ghost kept coming, turning their push into rout. We watched, frozen, as it herded them back, a shepherd of ruin. My radio crackled then, urgent. Whiskey 2! Identify that armor, over! But I couldn't answer, because deep down in the churn of grief and grit, I knew. Gears, engines, a city boy who had never seen a cow, but could hotwire the devil's ride. The Panthers broke, treads flailing snow, vanishing into the mist. Silence fell, broken only by the rogue tank's idle growl, idling like a drunk at last call. It sat there, turret askew, a trophy from nowhere. And in the hatch, a figure, slight, waving slow. Eddie Russo, alive, and the squad's salvation. The rogue Panther idled there in the valley like a drunk uncle at a funeral, its engine a low, uneven rumble that vibrated through the snow and into my bones. Smoke curled from its exhaust, black and oily, mixing with the cordite haze from the rout. The hatch yawned open, a black maw against the gray dawn, and there he was, Eddie Russo, 19, and looking every bit the ghost. We'd half prayed for. His face was smudged with grease and soot, eyes hollowed by whatever hell he'd walked through, but alive. The kid waved, slow and deliberate, like he wasn't sure if we'd shoot first or salute. I lowered my Garand, the barrel still warm from the last frantic shots, and waved back. Tex let out a breath he must have been holding since Anzio, his bar sagging in his grip. Holy Mother of God, Sarge, it's the pup. He stole a goddamn tank. Ramirez, propped against that laurel trunk, managed a weak chuckle that turned into a cough, blood flecking his lips. Fix things, he said. Yeah, Doc, fixed us a Panther. The valley hung in that fragile quiet after the storm, the kind where your ears ring from the blasts, and every creak of settling snow sounds like a tripwire. Jerry's remnants had scattered, their push shattered, but the air still hummed with threat. Those 2 other Panthers? They'd pulled back, but not far. Engines growled faint in the distance, regrouping behind the rise, their 75s probably traversing even now. hunting the anomaly that had crashed their party. And us, three ragged ghosts on a hillside, no line to the rear, Lou's body cooling in the drifts above. We'd bought time, but time was a lone shark in the Bulge pay. Up soon, or get collected. Eddie gunned the engine, a throaty snarl that echoed off the pines, and the tank lurched forward, treads biting deep into the slush. It wasn't graceful. The beast fishtailed once, shedding snow like dandruff, before steadying on a course upslope toward our ravine. Up close, the damage showed. A gouge along the glacier's plate from that ricochet, paint-scorched black, and one track link hanging loose like a bad tooth. But it moved, that Maybach diesel purring under his coaxing, a Frankenstein's monster he'd jury-rigged from the grave. He halted 20 yards out, the turret slewing lazy to cover our flanks, and killed the engine. Silence rushed back, broken only by the hatch hinges creaking as he swung his legs over the lip. He dropped to the snow with a thud, boots sinking ankle-deep, and staggered a step, exhaustion hitting like a club. His field jacket hung open, collar flecked with oil. And his hands. Christ, those hands were raw, knuckles split and black with grime, like he'd been elbow-deep in the devil's toolbox. The sidearm, a liberated Luger by the look, stuck awkward in his belt, and across his chest, he'd slung a Kraut MP40, magazine half spent. No helmet. Must have lost it in the snatch. His eyes met mine, not the scared rabbit stare from yesterday, but something forged, steady, like the first light hitting the muzzle of a well-oiled Springfield. "Sarge," he said, voice rough as gravel. "You boys all right? Saw the fireworks up here? Figured you could use a ride." Tex barked a laugh, raw and disbelieving, clapping Ramirez on the good shoulder. "A ride, kid? You just joyrode a Panther through Jerry's backyard. How in the hell?" Eddie shrugged, wincing as he did. Probably bruised ribs from the hatch slam or some close call we couldn't imagine. He glanced back at the beast, like he was appraising a hot rod back on the line in Detroit. "The pillbox you sent me to? Abandoned, like you said. But tracks everywhere, fresh, heading east. Then I heard him rev up, maybe a click out. Hid in the brush, watched three roll in from a tree line, crews barking orders like they owned the place. The trail one. It bogged, mud sucking the treads. Driver popped the hatch to check, cursing up a storm. I waited. Patient, like you drill in basic. When he went under to free the bogey, I slipped in close. Quiet. Clocked him with the entrenching tool, clean, no mess. Crawled aboard before the loader twigged. He paused, fishing a crumpled pack of Kraut cigarettes from his pocket. Real ones, not the American weeds. And lit one with a Zippo that wasn't his. The flame danced yellow in the chill, and he exhaled slow, smoke wreathing his face like a halo for a sinner. Inside, chaos. Wires everywhere, gauges in German. But gears. Gears are gears. Hotwired the starter, bypassed the ignition coil with a spare wire from the radio box. Revved her up, and the loader comes scrambling back. Had to handle him. Quick. Then we were rolling. The lead boys thought it was theirs at first, signaled me to form up. I played along till we hit the brush line, then swung wide. Rammed the trailer, snapped its track. The rest panicked. Fired wild. I didn't shoot much. Saved the Cokes for the infantry tailing him. Cokes is a beast, Sarge. Like a hose full of hornets. I listened, piecing it. The solo recon turning into a one-man armored raid. No Rambo charge, no Hollywood blaze. Just a city kid. Soft hands turned calloused in hours, turning the enemy's steel against them. The walkie-talkie had clicked once, I remembered. His signal, faint, drowned in static. Gears grinding, yeah. Not thunder. Eddie. My throat tightened. That old burn behind the eyes. You swallow down with the bile. You got brass ones, Russo. Thought you were buzzard bait by now. He met my gaze unflinching. Almost was, Sarge. Froze once hearing the diesels close. Thought of home, the plant horn at shift end, Ma's lasagna. But then I thought of you pulling me up last night. Preacher's way. Figured if I didn't move, none of us would. Ramirez groaned then, shifting against the tree, his face slick with sweat despite the cold. Talk later, heroes. I'm leaking like a sieve. Eddie knelt quick, slinging the MP40 and pulling a field dressing from his pack. Ours, the one I'd issued yesterday. Let me see, Doc. His hands, those mechanics' miracles, worked steady, peeling back the bloody gauze, probing the entry with gentle fingers, packing sulfa and fresh bandage tight. No fumbling, no greenhorn shakes. Tex covered them both, eyes on the valley, but even he glanced over, nodding faint approval. Steady as she goes, kid. That's a through and through. Won't dance tomorrow, but you'll dance. The radio in my pack crackled then, Hargrove's voice frantic over the net. Whiskey 2, report. We've got sightings of armor pulling back. What the hell happened? I keyed it, thumb steady for the first time since the trap sprung. Whiskey 2, actual. Hill secure. Enemy probe repelled. One enemy tank neutralized. Casualties light. Send evac for wounded. A pause, static hissing like disbelief. Neutralized. By what, Sergeant? Air. I glanced at Eddie, who was helping Ramirez to his feet, the pair leaning like old drunks. Improvise, sir. Preacher's providence. Laughter bubbled in my chest, unbidden. Hysteria's edge, but real. Hargrove sputtered something about confirming with battalion, but I clicked off. Details later. Survival first. But the reckoning wasn't done. The valley stirred again. Those two panthers, bold or desperate, cresting the rise like avenging angels. Engines roared full, treads churning snow to mud, turrets locked forward. 2 against 1, and ours was a stolen hack. Track loose, gun unzeroed. Eddie froze mid-step, eyes widening. Not fear, but calculation. Sarge, get Doc and Tex downhill. That beast'll cover. Tex hefted his bar, shaking his head. Like hell, pup. We ride or die together. But I saw it. The lay of the land, the ravine funneling them narrow. Our panther hull down behind a boulder outcrop. Eddie was already moving, scrambling aboard with the grace of a man who'd found his element. No time. I'll buy you the hill. Link up with the line below. That's an order from the guy who just stole Rommel's lunch. He didn't wait for argument. The engine barked to life, diesel smoke belching, and the turret slewed, jerky but on target. Eddie vanished inside, hatch clanging shut, and the rogue panther lurched forward, grinding over the lip into the open. The lead Jerry fired first, 75mm shell screaming, impacting short in a geyser of snow and rock that showered us like gravel. Our boy answered, Coke's MG rattling, stitching the lead tank's optics in a hail of 7.92. Sparks flew, glass shattering, and the Kraut slewed wild, blind. The second panther barked, shell glancing off our glacis with a clang like God's anvil. Close, too close, the shockwave knocking snow from the branches overhead. Eddie didn't flinch. He gunned it, treads biting, closing the gap, in a suicide feint. The damaged track chattered, shedding links, but he held line, ramming the blind one's flank. Metal screamed, rivets popping, armor buckling, and the Jerry turret jammed sideways, crew trapped in their steel coffin. The second tank reversed, desperate, but Eddie anticipated, swung the turret brute force, main gun barking point blank. No finesse, no ranging shot, just instinct. The 75mm round punching through the mantlet at 50 yards. Fire bloomed inside, orange tongue licking the ports, and black smoke poured as the crew bailed, hands high into the snow. It was over in heartbeats. The valley fell quiet again, save for the crackle of flames and the hiss of cooling metal. Our panther idled triumphant, turret askew, a dented crown on the kill. Eddie popped the hatch, gasping air like a diver surfacing, and slid down the hull, grinning faint, blood trickling from a cut on his brow, where shrapnel had kissed him. Fix that too, Sarge. Cokes jammed on the third burst, cleared it with a screwdriver from the toolkit. Tex whooped, pounding his back, careful of the ribs, and Ramirez clasped his hand, morphine dreams fading to respect. You're one of us now, Russo. Brother in the mud. I hung back a beat watching them, Tex rigging a white flag from a strip of bandage, Ramirez leaning on Eddie as we humped downhill toward the faint glow of our lines. The sun broke proper then, shafts piercing the clouds, turning the snow to diamonds and the blood to rust. Lou's ghost lingered up there, but lighter now, like he'd seen the punchline. Eddie fell in beside me, MP40 slung easy, that Luger glinting at his hip. No words at first, just steps in sync, boots crunching unison. Then quiet. You were right, Sarge, about the Valley of Shadow. Walked it. Came out. I clapped his shoulder, gentle this time, no jolt. Yeah, kid, you did. Preacher's proud. No sermon, no scripture. Just truth, plain as the grand in my hands. The Bulge ground on, Patton pinching from the south. Bradley's boys holding the line. But for us, the hinge held. Because of a city boy who'd never seen a cow but tamed a panther, like it was a Sunday drive. In the brotherhood of the frozen hell, that's what counted. Not glory, just coming back. For all of us. The end came quiet, like it always does. Evac choppers, well, jeeps with stretchers, rumbled up by noon, medics swarming Ramirez onto a litter, while Tex spun the yarn to Hargrove, who stared at Eddie like he'd grown horns. Brass wanted debriefs, citations probably. Eisenhower's pins shifting because of one stolen tank. But Eddie waved it off, lighting another kraut smoke as we loaded up. Just fixed what was broke, sir. I rode shotgun in the lead jeep, wind whipping through the open top, the squad, or the remnants, bunched tight in back. Eddie sat across, eyes on the pines blurring past, that 1,000-yard stare softening to something like peace. We rolled into the CP as dusk fell, the world a bruise of purple and gold. Hot chow waited, real stew, not sea rats, and a cot that didn't leak. But before bunk, I pulled him aside under the flare of a lantern strung from a pine. Russo. Eddie. That recon wasn't just a washout detail. Needed to see if you had it. The fire. He nodded slow, flicking ash into the slush. Knew that, Sarge. Felt it, but you gave me the rope. I gripped his forearm, old soldier's clasp, firm, wordless. Ropes for hanging or climbing. You climbed. Welcome to the fold, brother. He grinned then, real and tired, the city boy reborn in the forge of the Ardennes. Thanks, preacher. What's next? I lit my own smoke, American harsh and homey, and exhaled toward the stars. Next, we win this bastard war. One gear at a time. And in that moment, with the squad's laughter echoing faint from the mess tent, the weight lifted. Not gone, war don't work that way, but shared. The burden? Hell, it was ours now. Together. Months later, after the Bulge had bled out and Patton's ghosts pinched the Krauts into surrender, we crossed the Rhine like it was the last mile home. 1945, spring trying to crack the ice on the Elbe, but the war clung like frostbite. Numb, then sharp. Eddie Russo got his silver star, pinned on by some brass in a tent near Remagen, the kid standing tall in a jacket that finally fit right. Hargrove read the citation, voice cracking on extraordinary valor. But Eddie just nodded, eyes on the horizon where the bridge spanned black water. Just fixed what was broke, sir. The squad, Tex, Ramirez patched and limping, me with a purple heart I didn't earn, clapped him on the back. Beers, swiped from a captured Weinstube in hand. Toasts to Lou, to the ghost tank, rusting in some impound yard back in Belgium. To Preacher's pup, Tex slurred, and we drank deep, the foam tasting like absolution. But nights, when the rain hammered the canvas and the distant thump of 105s echoed like old sins, I'd wake to that rumble, not diesels, gears. Eddie's hands black with oil, turning the impossible. He changed after the hill. Quieter, the city twang hardened to something timeless, like the Ardennes pines that bent but didn't break. We pushed through the Ruhr, flushing SS diehards from cellars, and Eddie was always first through the door, MP40 low, eyes scanning corners like a blueprint. Saved Tex once in a factory ruin, spotting the tripwire on a booby-trapped door, the kind that'd paint the walls red. Gears don't lie, Sarge. Neither do wires. Tex owed him 2 lives now, paid in smokes and silence. Berlin fell in May, the Red Army's banners waving from the Reichstag like bloody flags. Zhukov's boys toasting vodka to Stalin while we nursed coffee from tin cups. Eisenhower met the Russians on the Elbe, handshakes and cameras, but we were miles back, mopping up stragglers. Eddie got a letter then, creased and stained, from his ma in Detroit. Come home, Tesoro. The plant's hiring and the cows, well, you can see one at the fair. He laughed, folding it careful into his breast pocket, but his eyes went distant. The 1,000-yard stare, but not empty. Full, like a tank, topped off for the long haul. VE Day hit like a whisper. Horns in Paris, church bells in London. But for us, it was a ceasefire in a bombed-out barn near the Rhine. We sat in the hay, passing a flask of schnapps, liberated from some Feldwebel's stash. The squad whole again with replacements. Who didn't know Lou's jokes? Eddie leaned against a beam, cleaning that Luger like it was his grand now. Smooth strokes, oiled precision. Think it's over, Sarge? Or just intermission? I puffed my pipe, the tobacco bitter as truth. Over enough. Brass says Japan's next. MacArthur's itching for his islands. But you earned the boat home. He shook his head slow. Not without you, preacher. Brothers in the gears. We shipped out together, stateside bound on a Liberty ship that rolled like a drunk in the Atlantic swells. Ramirez to California, Tex to the Panhandle. But Eddie and me? Buddies for the bottle, swapping yarns and Jersey dives till the ghosts faded. He went back to the plants, foreman by 47, hot wiring assembly lines into gold. Married a girl from the rivet crew, 2 kids who never saw a cow, till the county fair. Me? I preached for real after. Small parish in Ohio, quoting psalms with the taste of cordite still on my tongue. Eddie'd visit, tank tales turning to tall ones over coffee, the kids wide-eyed at Uncle Preacher's war stories. Years piled like snowdrifts, Korea came, then Nam, but we stayed out, Eddie wrenching Fords, me mending souls. Last time I saw him, 82, cancer chewing his lungs like shrapnel. He gripped my hand in that hospital bed, voice a rasp. Fixed a lot, Harlan. But the best? That hill. Us. I nodded, throat thick. Amen, brother. Walked the valley. Climbed out. He went quiet that night, gears stilling at last. The Ardennes thaws every spring, pines whispering to the wind. But some echoes linger. A rumble in the mist, a kid with soft hands turning steel to salvation. In the brotherhood, that's the real fix. Eternal. The years turn like the crankshafts Eddie loved so much. Slow at first, then picking up speed until you couldn't tell the blur from the spin. 1950, Korea calling, but we were done with that racket. Eddie stuck to the assembly line, Ford's shadow lengthening over Detroit like a benevolent giant, cranking out Chevys and Mercuries that purred like the Panther never did. He rose quick, shift boss by 52, then floor manager, barking orders, with that same calm squint he'd fixed on Jerry's dash gauges. Keep her steady, boys. No slips, or she throws a rod. The men listened. Eddie didn't yell, didn't need to. He'd seen real throws, men flying from hatches in flames, and a loose bolt in peacetime was just a paycheck ding, not a grave. Not me? The pulpit in Ohio suited after a fashion. St. Mary's, a clapboard box with a steeple that leaned like it remembered the Bulge winds. Sundays I'd mount the steps in black wool, collar stiff as a field dressing, and preach to farmers with calluses thicker than mine. The Lord is my shepherd, I'd intone, but my mind wandered to valleys of shadow that weren't Jordan's banks. The flock nodded, passing the plate, dimes and quarters, clinking like spent casings. But after over coffee in the vestry, they'd ask about the war. Heard you were over there, Reverend Whitaker. Bulge, wasn't it? I'd smile faint, stirring sugar that never quite dissolved. Aye, cold as the devil's anteroom. But we held. No tales of stolen tanks. Those stayed for Eddie, swapped over long-distance lines when the kids were abed. We met up every Veterans Day, a ritual forged in foxholes. First in 46, a VFW hall in Toledo, stale beer and band music that wheezed like a punctured lung. Eddie rolled in with his new bride, Rosa. dark hair like Ramirez's old sweetheart, eyes that laughed without asking questions. She squeezed my hand. He talks about you, Padre. Preacher this, Valley that. I chuckled, clapping Eddie's back. Kid fixed more than tanks that winter. Over foamy mugs, we'd reminisce. Texas yarns turning taller. Ramirez's letters from the orchards. Lemons sweeter than sea rats, Sarge. And Lou's ghost fading to a fond ache. Eddie'd sketch on napkins, diesel innards, gear ratios, like it unpicked the knots in our heads. By the 60s, the meats shifted. Eddie's backyard in the suburbs, white picket whispering against chain link, kids, Tommy and Maria, chasing fireflies while we grilled burgers on a Weber that belched smoke like a Sherman. Rosa'd set the table, potato salad heaped, and we'd toast with Popst, the cans sweating in the humid dark. To the fold, I'd say, and Eddie'd raise his, that Luger grin flashing. One gear at a time. The war crept in sideways, TV flickering with nom footage, boys too young for the draft, staring at Walter Cronkite like he'd stolen their stars. Eddie'd go quiet then, flipping channels to baseball. Tigers'll take the pennant, but his eyes, those mechanic's eyes, saw tripwires in the jungles. Same mud, different valley, he'd mutter once after a six-pack. I nodded, pipe smoke curling, but we climbed out. They will too. The kids grew, Tommy wrenching engines like his pa's. Ford plant by 18, hands black as Eddie's had been in the pillbox. Maria, sharp as a bayonet, off to college on a scholarship, studying history. Dad's stories, she'd say, visiting the parish one summer, notebook in hand. The tank thing, true, I'd hedge, stirring tea. Your father's a fixer, Maria. Turns rust to gold. But Eddie told her straight, one Christmas, snow dusting the eaves like old Ardennes flakes. Wasn't heroics, kiddo. Fear, mostly. Froze till I didn't. She hugged him fierce, whispering, preacher's way, and he laughed, but his eyes misted, ghosts in the tinsel. The 80s hit hard. Plants shuddering, Detroit's heart sputtering like a flooded carburetor. Eddie retired early, 84, badge pinned to his den wall beside the Silver Star, yellowed now. We drove the old routes, backroads to Toledo, radio crooning Sinatra like a field phonograph. Remember the walkie clicks? He'd ask, fingers drumming the wheel. Thought you were done for. I'd puff my pipe, window cracked to the chill. Thought the same, pup. But gears turn. Cancer whispered first in 89. A shadow on the lung x-ray like shrapnel lodged deep. Chemo bought time, bald as a recruit, but grinning through the nausea. Fixing me up, Doc, he'd joke to the nurses. Rosa at his side, hand in his like a steady throttle. Last meet was 91. Hospice room smelling of antiseptic and wilted roses. Tex long gone, heart attack in 75 mid-yarn. Ramirez, too, letters stopping after a stroke. Just us, machines beeping soft as Morse. Eddie gripped my hand, grip weak but sure. Harlan, tell the flock. Valley's real, but the climb, worth it. I nodded, voice thick. Amen, brother. Rest easy. He slipped that night, gears quiet at last, Rosa weeping soft beside him. I buried him under Ohio pines, squad remnants, widows and grands in attendance. Eulogy short. Eddie Russo fixed things, tanks, lines, us. Back home, the pulpit felt heavier, but the words flowed truer. And in quiet hours, I'd hear it, that rumble. Not thunder, homecoming. The Ardennes thaws, but some fixes endure. Eternal, like the fold.